for coming out to hear this presentation on Figma for WordPress folks, right? Because lots of people can use Figma for lots of different things. I know someone who used it to plan their wedding. So kind of versatile. So who am I? I'm Roxanne G. By day, I'm a UX designer at AssetWorks LLC, which is an asset management company. So I get to work with development teams on the East and West Coast of the USA, India, UK, Western Canada, and I work mostly on responsive web apps with lots of data, sometimes native mobile apps. But Figma has been really helpful in collaborating with these people from all across the globe. So even though I'm a UX UI designer, pretty much most like 95% of the time, my first design love are websites. I became infatuated with websites from the old GeoCities days, if anyone remembers that. And as far as WordPress goes, and I'll just click here for my portfolio. Let me move this out of the way, bring it up here so you can see. So this portfolio has everything in it that you never wanted to know about me. But you can see that I host my own portfolio in WordPress, and I also am an Elementor user. I run, design a grassroots holistic education initiative. I volunteer my time for this, and I do a website for a psychologist. So I don't do a whole, and I've done a little bit of work for Code for Philly in the UX realm and handing off designs to developers. So that's kind of what I do outside of my basic UX UI work. So let's see. And these are just my interests and things I like to do, and these are my pronouns. So if you do want to get a hold of me after this presentation, just hit up on my portfolio and you can find all kinds of ways to reach out. So this is how I'm going to organize the presentation. And I'm going to discuss basically in words about what Figma is as a way of introduction for folks that, don't really have any experience with it. I'm going to show a few live examples of desktop and mobile size prototyping. Show how to use some plugins for contrast checking, pulling in royalty-free images, creating some corporate art, quickly changing to different palettes, and just some clickable prototypes in general. But feel free to jump in with questions at any time. Just interrupt me. If you put stuff in the chat, I'm not going to see it, but Liam will shout it out. He's also going to give me a 40-minute warning because I have a problem where I tend to talk too much in presentations. So I don't want to go over and fatigue anyone at this hour. And I do love Figma so much that I can get carried away. So yeah, I've been using Figma for about 4 years. And it is great. And as a UX UI designer, technically, I'm supposed to be really software agnostic. But I have to say that Figma it makes it so easy to organize design systems, prototype rapidly, and collaborate globally, in sync or async with people. And the great thing about it, first and foremost, is that you don't need any software. It all runs in a browser. You can even design in a browser. I know a lot of you were saying that you've been given links to files and just viewing them in the browser, but technically you don't need to download the app. You can do all your design right there in the browser, and that makes it really super accessible. I mean, all you have to do is sign up for a free account on figma.com. And I mean, technically you can have a Chromebook and start designing. So like young kids can just start designing in Chromebooks if they wanted to, which I think makes it really great. And I think the the younger kids get started designing and doing things, I think the better. But here I'm just like logging in here in my browser. I'm using Chrome and I'm going into figma.com. And because it recognizes me, it just loads right into my home screen for my design. Now I have a couple different personas that I use for Figma. And you can have multiple logins for Figma too and switch in between them, very similar to the way that you can switch between Chrome identities. If you have different Chrome identities in the browser, you can do the same thing in Figma. So this is my identity for my personal design work and my WordPress work, and this would be my Asset Works, my day job. And I could switch back and forth between the two. And here I am in my my personal persona, and then I jump right into all my design projects. And each one of these projects has a number of design files in there. So there is an app that you can download for your computer. I have a Mac, so I run it on a Mac, but like I said, you could run it pretty much on anything. Most people I know just run it on a Windows computer. And I prefer to download the app for my computer, but honestly, the only reason I do that is because I'm the type of person, like you can see, like I always have a million tabs open in Chrome, and I'd rather not also have to find where my design files are. So it's just the only reason I really do it is because it's easier for me to just find where my designs are, but all the functionality is the same. So if I was in the browser here, okay, let's see, go back to figma.com. Nope, not that one. I'll go over here. All right. So now here I am. Now I'm in the browser, and I'm just going to jump into, actually, let me go in here. I'm just going to jump into like a design file. And here I am, I'm in a design file, and this is the interface. So I can see all this functionality I have here. It's all the same functionality, all right there. Everything's the same way, even pulling in stuff from my design system, because everything is saved in the cloud. Now in the desktop application, see, I'm just like pulling in assets that I've pre-created. So it's like, yeah, everything is saved in the cloud. Now the desktop app does allow you, if you do lose connectivity and you're in the desktop app, it will save things in cache for a little bit. So there's that added advantage if you're in the app and your Wi-Fi goes a little wiggy. You you can still work for some time until your Wi-Fi reattaches itself. So but really I never leave Figma all day long. I make my clickable prototypes there, my slideshows. This slideshow is in Figma. I do my handoff schematics for developers, like I was saying earlier. I whiteboard in here. The only place I go outside of Figma is to Jira to post links to my clickables or a video of me running through a clickable prototype. I hardly ever leave. Of course, when I'm doing WordPress work, like I think like Win was saying, go back and forth between Elementor and Figma. So I do that as well. As I was saying, real-time virtual collaboration is another great strength of Figma. And like I said, I work with folks all over the world, and I share a link to a file. I can lock the permissions on the link however I like, share the link, and my viewers can comment right in the file. They can call me from the file, like in the Slack huddle. So, and I wanted to show you that. So if I, for example, I'm just going to go into one of my my work projects. So this is a design file that I'm in. And say I'm here, you can see each design file is you can divide it into pages. So say I'm working on the prototype page right now. This would be the page where I do like my actual like specs and handoffs, but that one's not complete. I'm on the prototype right now and I want to share it out with someone to get their comments. I would just right click and copy the link to the page and, you know, send it to them. And then they could just go to the browser. They would just click on the link and they would open it. And it, because I always work in the app, it thinks that I want to be in the app. But for example, this is what like my developers would see. My developers would see, they would just see this file open up right in their web browser. And they would have this ask to edit, but I only give my developers view privileges. And let me show you how you set that. So in the sharing, right now I have it set so that anyone with the link can view, but I could also change this to, oh, hold on a second. Let me go over here because I was in the view part, the view one. So over here, like only people invited to this file can access, or anyone with the link, or anyone with a link and a password. Like I could say anyone with the link can view, can edit, can view prototypes. So you can really lock down the link that you give. You just have to be sure you flip the right switches on. And that's the link that they're going to get. So let's see. So now if my developers are in here, they're just zooming around. They get to see all the pages on the side when you click in here. So you have a left side panel and a right side panel. And the left side panel is sort of like navigation. It's all your pages. So right now I'm in this frame called suggested, and I'm clicking in to this this component called Monday. And it has a header in it and things like that. So I'm navigating into the frame. And then on the right side, you can inspect, and there's where you can see the CSS for it, the different colors, the hex codes are right there. You can copy the hex codes and paste them. You can switch the hex codes if they want to see it in HSL or RGB. You can zoom right in there and say, what is the color on that number? Any type of effect that's on it. And let's see. And they can also export different things. Like, for example, if I say they didn't have this, they needed this icon in SVG, they're a developer, they would just click on export. And you can export a lot of things in Figma in these formats: PNG, JPEG, SVG, PDF. So, you know, my developer would want an SVG of this icon, for instance, preview it, yep, that's what I want, and they would just export it. And then they could just bring it into their code repository and use it. And let's see, they can see the comments that I have in here, but like I said, a lot of times, the developers I work with, they don't often look at comments, but if I wanted to comment, I'd make a comment. And then it just gets added, and then they could click on each one of the comments and scroll around and see different things about it. But I usually write up a whole spec section for them as opposed to that, or I actually, you could say I actually make these obnoxious post-its that I put in the file so that they can't be missed. So any questions so far?
Johnny Shaw here, and yeah, I'm getting a few questions. Let me think here. Does it write out the code? Like, will it create a single CSS file that applies to this whole thing, or you copy and paste off of elements, or the developer does that to build their files?
The developer would be recreating from what they see and what CSS they have here. If this were a native app, well, this one is a native app that I'm using. They could also look at the iOS code, you know, or if they were doing it for Android. There's a couple things, like if you have a design system, you can use something called Storybook, where the developers and the designers take the time to get each component that you have in your design system to pre-make them in code. So for example, let me go over here. Oh, this thing is always in the way. So for example, our design system at AssetWorks is all broken down into different files. But if let's go into the components, fields, and selectors. If I were working, like the developers, I'm trying to get them to do this now, but if we were using Storybook, they would take the way I've created all these this checkbox, for example, component, and they would build it in code. They would do a pull request. I would review it, and it would be in this like copy and paste library of code for them, where then they could just pull that in and use it. But until that is made, they would just be looking at each design file and building it pretty much. Like for example, this form, they could go in here and also you can see, if I click in, oh, you know what? It's easier to see here. How you can see all the, yeah. You see how you see all the distances?
Yeah.
So in this case, the developer would just be building this using all the information here, as opposed to it creating a code, a bunch of code for the whole project.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? No? All right. So let me
I have
jump back.
a question in the chat. I was just asking if
Sure.
you ever prototype in Elementor.
I do prototype in Elementor. A lot of times I will pull in a UI. If I like a UI kit, I'll just pull that UI kit into Elementor and use it that way and just change it up like that. In that case, since I'm using a UI kit, that I brought, like an Elementor UI kit that I just brought in, I would just make the changes in there. But what I would often do if I'm going to buy a UI kit, for example, for Elementor, I might bring that UI kit, those pages, into Figma using and I'll show this later, the build.io plugin, and then make some typography changes or palette changes and show them to my client. And then if my client said, yeah, I like it with the pinks instead of the blues, and then I would go into Elementor and make that change. So it really depends where you're starting from. Now, in my work, because in my main day work, I always start in Figma because I'm passing everything to developer. But when I'm doing my personal WordPress work, I often start, because they're just simple websites, I'll often start in Elementor. Any other questions?
Yes, Roxanne, it's Johnny again.
Yeah.
Going back to the user interface, once you've designed an element, this is something I'd like to see if you're able to demonstrate it now. Once you've designed a widget, how do you not a widget, an element, I guess you would call it. How do you go about duplicating elements within the interface? How would you build something like what we're saying on the other screens?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that real soon. I'm going to
Okay.
just jump through this background stuff, and then I'm going to get hands-on.
Okay. Okay. Sorry to jump the gun.
No, I'm
What I do.
glad you're anxious for that.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions on the background of Figma before I start running into get into the file? Nope. Okay. So this slide is just showing you a quick time-lapse video of me just like pulling in from our design system. See, I already took the time to create a lot of components and put them in a design system, and then I just pull them in to the file. And it's kind of like building with Legos, which is kind of nice. When I came on board at my organization, my manager had a bunch of sketch drawings of his, you know, of various applications that he was working on. He didn't really have a design system. And I brought, you know, you can just drag and drop sketch files right into Figma and they come right in. And I use that as the baseline to create the design system in Figma that he had already designed all the styles for. And then we built out from there. And now we just use it like Legos, like this. So it's really great to be able to prototype rapidly and get feedback early and often. So yeah, now we're going to pretty much get into the file and get building. So what I'm going to do, you can see that I was just in Figma. Like I said, I like to do my presentations in Figma. I did all my slides in here. This was the little prototype I made, and I showed that little time lapse. And now I'm going to go into another page of this design file, which I'm calling the playground file. And the playground file, we're going to do a lot of hands-on stuff in these sections. Okay. So, but before I get into that, let me just run this one slide for you. Okay, so let's see, how did I want to say about this? Okay, so there are a lot of great places where you can really learn Figma skills. One of them is in the community, the Figma community, and I'll show you how to get in there in a minute. Another, my favorite, is the YouTube channels. Figma has its own YouTube channel. It's a great place to learn how to do things, how to do the prototypes. There's a great subreddit on Figma design, and I hop in there occasionally. And Figma has an annual free conference called Config, and Config 2023 is coming up June 21st through the 22nd. And registration is already open. And if you're really interested, I highly recommend that you like jump into a bunch of those things. So yeah, so I wanted to show you a couple more things here, just kind of understanding where things are. So you see how I'm in the Figma app and I have all these different tabs up here. And when I hover over them, you see like a thumbnail of what that is. So everything with the play sign is a prototype I am running. Anything with the blue background and the white pen is a design file. And when I'm in the design file, I can either be looking at the design, the prototype, which shows all the linkages. For example, you could see when I'm in the prototype here, when I click, like this is all like making your clickable. My interaction, when I click on this, I navigate to number 8 and things like that. And inspect is as I showed you already. And the tabs that are purple squares with the white crayon are Fig Jam, which is a whiteboard. And I do most of my discovery in here and do like a simple whiteboarding prototypes before I actually get into the nitty gritty of the prototyping in Figma. So let me just jump back over here, back into my playground file. So now, briefly, let's talk about frames versus groups. We're going to get into the file here. And by the way, Figma files have a .fig extension. So I'll give you this .fig. I'll probably throw it on the Slack channel. And that way you can have this file for yourself and then open it up and play with it. You can also put links in files, like these are all live links. You can have live links to things. Right now, this is linking to a YouTube video where I got some of this information from. but you would just double click, select, Control K, and then just you can type in a link. And then you have live links in your files, and then the links also, as you see, show up in the prototypes. So let's talk about, I think the most important things about Figma when you're just starting off is to understand frames versus groups, to understand scrolling and how to set up scrolling. And then once you have that, you can create a little mini app. So let's talk about frames versus groups. And each design system, each design software that you use, they always have their own hierarchy and how they organize things. I know Sketch, some of them use artboards and things like that. But in Figma, it's pages on the side, and then frames, and then groups. So with frames, you can't make a frame. You can't make a group. You can make a frame. So this icon up here is the frame icon. Under it, you can also make sections or slices. I've never used slices. Sections are just ways to group your information, and frames are super, super important. So if I click on the design tab over here, you can see that Figma comes canned with a whole bunch of frames already. You got your phone frames, you got your tablet frames, you've got your desktop frames. What I like is I like to look at the prototypes, for example, and these prototypes here that you see, they're the ones that have the nice skin when you run the prototype. You don't need a skin to run the prototype, but didn't it look so much better when I was running the prototype and it was up there in a tablet, or it was up there in a laptop? It just really makes a great impression. So I try to match to what I know Figma has already for a skin to the size of the frame I'm going to use. So I know they have the iPad mini skin. So when I grab a frame, I might say, well, I'm going to grab the iPad mini frame. You saw it, just threw it right in here. And I'm going to turn it sideways and put it in landscape. So now I have this frame here. I'm going to call it sample. And so I made a frame, but you can't make a group because a group is a group of things that already exist. So if I grab, I'm just going to grab a button, a couple different buttons, a couple different things from my the design system. And if I get two things, say I select this item and I shift select this item and I right click, I can group that selection. And now I've made a group. I need things to make a group. You can either hit Control Z or you can right click and you can ungroup. I could also select two things and put them in a frame. And honestly, I mostly frame everything because I hardly ever use groups unless I'm doing a very intricate select. That's when I might group something, but I hardly ever use groups anymore. So let's see. Let's ungroup. I've got my items here. So say I put this button here on the right, you can see constraints. Now, if I want to constrain that button, I have it selected to the bottom and the middle, I would select it like this. If I want to constrain this button to the middle and the middle, maybe I want to do this one to the upper right, and maybe this one to the upper left, constrain like that. So you can constrain items within your frame, which is really great because then when I resize it, everything stays where it's supposed to stay. So that's one of the powers of frames. Let's see. Another power of frames, some of my colleagues were already talking about it, are auto layout. And auto layout is a gift from God in Figma, in my opinion. It's a property you can add to frames and components that lets you just design them and line everything up really beautifully and do padding. It's sort of like creating the frame, and it's almost like you're really building it as if you were building a flex box or a flex grid, because now this is just a frame that I have here. And if you look at the layers on the side, it's just a frame. It just has the basic frame icon there. And within it, I have a frame. So you can nest frames within frames. Now, if I ungroup this, then these things are no longer in a frame. I just have a button, I have some text. I'm actually going to reduce the text. Now say I want to put auto layout on this. I'll select the frame, it's got items in it. I'm going to add auto layout to it. I'm constraining everything, I'm aligning everything to the left. And then I can set my my top padding, my left and right padding. Say I want to make my left and right padding 32, my top and bottom 40. Everything is just automatically lining up for me. And it automatically set up the, you know, the layout in between. Say I want to go 240 here because I'm on an 8-grid system. And then boom, it just lined it up. Now, you can see my frame on the side. I no longer have the basic frame icon. I have the auto layout frame icon. So now this is auto layout. I could go a step further and create a component out of this, and then I can use it in a design system. Now, if I wanted to make a copy of this, I could, well, for me, I hold down Option and I drag on a Windows machine. I forget what the equivalent for Option is. But then I could hit Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D, and I'm making lots and lots of copies. So Johnny, back to what you were asking about copying things. You want to ask more questions here on that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. You're just doing, and you could save these kind of as library elements or groups, I guess. And that would kind of put them into a thing that you would pull them aside. And okay, it's reminding me a little bit of Illustrator in some ways.
Yeah, any file that you're working in could become a library file. Like say I made this and I made a component over here, I made that. Now, if I go to assets on the side, it's showing me a whole bunch of like assets from my design file because I've connected them to this. See this little book over here, you can see that all these, the ones that say AW, are all the ones that are from another file that was published and used as a library. But now say I have this design file and I'm designing brand new components. I would open local components and you could see these are my 2 local components I just made. Now say I made a brand new design file, I made a whole bunch of brand new components. Now I can publish this file, the components in this file, and it can be its own design file, which then I can connect to from other design files and just drag them in the way I'm dragging in things over here.
So elements that you design once become sort of global in a sense.
Yes. Any
Like,
design file that you're working in, isn't that crazy?
right.
It's so cool. Like if I go and like publish these, I'm going to publish these too. It's publishing. Boom, successfully published. Now I'm going to start a whole new design file. And I'm going to connect to, let's see if I can find it, the WordPress one. I'm going to turn off all the other ones just so it's not confusing. Stop. That's the thing in AssetWorks, all our design system, we went at first we had it all in one design file, but it became too unwieldy, so we have it all in separate design files. So now look, this new file I just made, I'm connecting to the library I just published, those 2 components, right? So here I am, layers, page 1, and I'm going to put in a new frame. And I'm going to go to my assets. And now I'm just pulling them right in. And I'm just using them, pulling them right
Look at
into
that.
this new design system, this new file. Cool?
Very cool. Very nice. Thank you.
All right. Back into the playground. Any questions on frames versus groups? How am I doing on time? I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, you know a lot. This is amazing. You're coming up on 40 minutes.
All right.
But I'm enthralled. Welcome others to share. I think most of us are probably pretty happy to keep watching, but I'll let the others pipe up a little bit.
If I can go 10 more minutes without boring you, I think you'll appreciate it. Is that
I
all
think
right?
everyone will be very happy for that, and
All right.
maybe even 15 too if you need it.
All right. So here I want to show you a little bit about scrolling. So this is without a sticky scroll on the left, and this is with a sticky scroll. And Figma just updated their scrolling. They made it even more awesome because, you know, when you're showing somebody something, you want to show them like how you want the scrolling behavior. And like for me as an interaction designer, that's really like my key thing. The interactions are so important. So if I just start fresh with this one, and you can click on any frame and hit run and it'll run it. Or I could click on prototype and I could always, oh, that's because it's in there. If this were a frame, I could just add a flow starting point. I could also add a flow starting point. You don't have to, but I'm going fast, so I'm just going to run it. So here's this frame. You could see I'm actually doing a prototype. It doesn't have a skin. It's just a basic frame. And you can see it's not scrolling at all. And I want to fix that. So what I want to do is click on it, go to prototype tab, and I want to say I want it to be vertically scrolling. So another important thing is when I click on this frame, I'm clipping the content. When I unclick the content, you can see that I have an overflow. And obviously you can't have vertical scrolling unless you have content that's overflowing the frame. So I'm going to click the clip the content, and now you can see the whole thing is scrolling. But that's not exactly what I wanted. So like you can really get in there. And so now you can click on any element and click on the prototype tab and set its specific scrolling, which is so much nicer than it was even 2 weeks ago. They're constantly updating this. So now I want to select this navigation element and say, not only do I want it to be sticky, I want it to be sticky at the top edge. Did I do that right? Let's see. Sticky at the top edge. Okay. So let's run it. And then it's doing the thing I wanted to do. So it's really cool that way. To set up scrolling. But if you get your scrolling down and you get your frames versus groups down and your components, your design system, you can pretty much do anything. So this was a little website I made. One of my favorite movies is Waitress. And so I just made this little website for you guys to see. And it's just a basic movie website. And it's got, you know, a bunch of cards that describe all the actors in there. And, you know, I didn't bring it all the way out, but I could have clicked on this and then made the little dialogue for sharing and then the read more so that it expands and things like that. But let me just give you the basics of how I threw this together. So I really like this iPad mini. So what I did is, so for the frame, I grabbed my iPad mini friends, clicked on design, turned it to landscape. And then you just, you know, I just pulled these in. These are things I already had in the design system where I grabbed from the community. Oh, I never showed you how to look at things in the community. Let me show you real quick. Community is an important resource. So let me pause for a sec, jump back into home. I'm in my persona. You see community over here, and you can browse the community as different personas. You'll probably only have one, but like I said, I have two. So if I browse the community, now I'm in community, I can search for a lot of different things. I can search for playground files. The ones by Figma are really good. I can search for, say I wanted, I don't know, cards. Now it's giving me everything about cards, and then I can filter that search by, I just want plugins. And plugins are the different little apps you can put inside of Figma to do really cool things. I can look for plugins that have to do with cards, files, or templates that have to do with cards and things like that. So sorry, I forgot to show them to you earlier. So anyway, like I was in the community and I grabbed like a bunch of like a Chrome tab component just so I can have it and I could just pull it in. So you know, I would grab this one, Control C, select the frame you want it to be in, hit Control V. And then you always look on the left, your navigation. You can see in this frame, everything's nested like a directory structure. I have my status bar. So then I can, you know, center it and pop it to the top. My safe space, Control C, select my frame, Control V, and I want this all the way at the bottom and center it. Let's see, URL, I'm going to stick you in here. And then I'm just going to drag you up, make sure you don't leave the frame. Let's center it. And I like to zoom way in. Make sure I'm in there. Pop it down a little bit because the tabs are going to be there ahead of it. Control C, select my frame, Control V. And I'm just using my arrow keys, just pop it down, make sure everything lines up. Okay. All right. And so if I go to run this, it's going to rebuild. Sometimes it gets confused. And then you close your prototype and let it rebuild. There you go. So if I go to scroll now, none of it's really scrolling. So now I'm going to go over here and, you know, grab a rectangle, throw a rectangle in here just so there's vertical overflow. See, I have it clipped, unclipped, and then I want to, let's see, the safe space prototype, I want to say fix, stay in place. The status bar, fix, stay in place. The whole thing, I grab the whole frame. I'm going to say that's going to have vertical scroll behavior. This guy is going to scroll with parent. It's got no overflow. This guy, I want to make sticky, stay at the top edge. And let's see how we did. Run it. Is that running? And see, it's not quite doing what I want. And the reason it's not is because on the left, I am going to grab the status bar, bring it down into this spot, and put the URL on top of it. And this is like a new thing. See, now it's doing what I want. I want it to scroll like that. So that's a new thing, like moving stuff one on top of the other because different things. Oh, somebody's got a raised hand. Question?
Yeah, first of all, I have never used the scrolling. This is amazing. So awesome. Thank you. I just have a question, and I had to stop in the beginning, so you may have gone over this, but one of the issues I have with Figma is when I'm trying to arrange my layers, it always puts things on the top. So as I'm building from the top down, right, it'll put like my footer content up at the top of the list. Do you know if there's a way to reverse that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like when you're well, you just saw me drag stuff around and reorganize it.
I'm always having to reorganize things over there. And every time I add something new, even if it's at the bottom of the frame, it puts it up at the top.
Yeah, that's what they do. And then what's really funny is then I go back in and I like to reorganize all my files and I just move stuff around. But you see how sometimes some stuff needs to be on top of other stuff in order for the scrolling to work appropriately. So sometimes you might want it to be like top to bottom, but
Right.
other times you'll have to move like this one. I don't really want it third in the scroll section. I want it first because I
Right.
wanted it sticky at top.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there's a way to reverse that, because as you're designing from the top down through the page, but it keeps adding everything so that your header ends up at the bottom if you don't manually move it.
Yeah, and you know, I go so fast now that a lot of times I don't even notice that until I'm doing my handoff file and I'm doing all that cleanup to make it tidy for the developers. And then, you know, and even naming your layers. That's why it's important to keep going back and naming things, or
Yeah.
else you'll be like, what frame is this? Especially when you're nesting frames within frames within frames.
Yeah, I'm super organized that way. It just really drives me crazy that when I go to add something, that the header's at the bottom. I wish it
It
would.
drives me crazy.
I wish it would they would put new stuff down, like in the order that you're adding it.
Yeah, that drives me crazy too. And I'm just showing an example over here when I do tables. You know, really important, like the different frames that come in. It's like just showing people the nesting. Like things get really complicated and when you're using auto layout. And then, you know, like for example, this item, right? When I was building it. Oh no, that frame's on top. That frame's on top. See, I probably reordered this as I was doing it and I didn't even notice moving stuff around. Another question. I think somebody else had a question.
I have a hand up, so I may as well
Yes.
go with it. Is there any automation of a responsive element to this? Do you not asking for a demo necessarily, but a true or
Mhm.
false? Is there something where you design it once and then it generally understands this is a responsive element, sort of like you would get designing in an Elementor?
Yeah, you know, responsiveness is part of my life. The way there is a plugin that does responsiveness. I don't love it. So I often don't use it. And what I was just going to show you was when I did this. When I design, what do I normally do? I usually give, like, these are my breakpoints, right? I just use the Bootstrap breakpoints. I will make 3 layups: tablet, extra small, and the large one. Now there is a plugin, I think it's called responsiveness. You'd have to look it up. I look it up, where you could click on each one of these and give it to them and give it the breakpoints that you're using. And in your prototype, as you're resizing, it will make it look this way. But you still have to feed it the 3 layouts in
Gotcha.
order to show that behavior. I
Okay,
forget
thank
what
you.
it's called. It's called responsive. Trying to find it. Yeah, it's called Breakpoints. If you want to play with that, use that Breakpoints plugin. It's okay, I've used it, but for, you know, for the setup to get it to do the thing,
Yeah,
I just say this is what it looks like.
my guess there is that as a designer, your specificity level is just, it's not going to automatically do what you would want. So you make sure that it's exactly what you want.
Exactly, because for this instance, see this hero? I pull this out, like I want the hero to look like this when I'm at this breakpoint, you know. So that's, I'm gonna hide this stuff. So when I go to export, screens are never big enough. I'd export this as a ping, you know, and you can even preview, see what you say, and then turn it into a webp and then bring it into Elementor and then use that as my hero at the extra small breakpoint, whereas I would use this hero for the larger breakpoint. So, and that's how I would do it for the Elementor people. I actually did that recently for the psychologist website. They have a different header at a different breakpoint. So
Perfect,
these
thank you.
questions are great. Another question?
Roxanne, it's Liam. I wonder if you can walk us through, and maybe we already have, and we're looking at it, what your handover document looks like, what your handover materials look like when you hand it off to a developer.
Yep. So let me go into my AssetWorks persona. And you see, I actually have separate Handoff files. When I'm in, we pay for the pro plan, so I actually use versioning. And what'll happen is I'll have a design file, and then the final version of that design file, I'll take that version and I'll make a duplicate, and then I make a handoff. But on the free plan, these are what my handoff, you would just create handoff files on one of your layers. And let me see a good one. Oh, what's a good one? This one. I like this one. And I actually took a course on how to create handoff files for developers. You can see that these are all my flows, flow 1, flow 2, flow 3, and I actually put in the arrows to make it like a schematic. And I just use a plugin called Protoflow. And for example, you could like the way I made this arrow, I just say convert interactions to that selection. See, I just put the arrow in there. And then I actually go in and I do this one would have all the arrows, and then I have a link to the prototype, because you can link to your prototypes right in here. And then I have a whole section on the components. And what's really cool now, if you grab this component in Figma, you pull it out and you use a plugin, and the plugin is called, I think it has number 8 in it. What was it called? Spec 8? 8, yeah, 8 shapes spec. This is really cool. It just makes your specs for you for that component. Isn't that cool? The colors and all that. But I was doing these manually at the time, and then all my dialogues and the different situations that they would come in, and the colors, the different shadows, different icons that I'm using, links to material design icons. And so this is a very complicated workflow. Oh, and I would have to say specific things about the design specs, because the software is so complicated that sometimes I have to give very specific instructions here to the developer. And then, but I've already gone through, this also links to the clickable prototypes so that the developer would be able to not only look at the video of me going through the prototypes, but also click through the prototype themselves. And then I also put links to the videos of me going through all the prototypes. And I know I'm running out of time, so I won't continue with this one, but I wanted to show you something really cool, really fast. If you go into this is what I often use with WordPress. If you go into this builder, what's it called? Builder.io. Yeah, Builder.io. Here it is. If you use this, and somebody clued me into this, and you import from Figma, and say you had a staging site, you can put your staging link in here. I'm just going to put actually I'm just going to put this in. Now, this is just my portfolio, but say I had staging.bragaphd.com, like my staging site, and you can bring it in any one of the 3 layouts, and you just want to import it to Figma. Now it just comes in right from the web, right? Now say I was just I was showing this to a client, say it was something I was working up in Elementor, and I worked it up in one way, and I had already set my hierarchy for my colors and my typography, but my client didn't like the colors I picked. So instead of like redoing the whole thing in Elementor, I might just bring it in here in the frame and then say, well, let me just change all the black to blue. Let me change the white to pink. You know, let me change the text to, I don't know, blue. That way I could, like, maybe I worked something up in Elementor, but my client wants to see it with a lot of different styles of typography and different color palettes so that they can get like a sense of which way they want to go, but you don't want to remake it over and over again in Elementor. Like, do it once in staging, bring it in here, and then you can just like make copies of it and change that to blue. Oh, this is what it looks like when it has a blue background. Oh, this is what it looks like, you know, when it has a gray background. And then you could just change all the typography and stuff and like, and just like quickly show it to them in prototypes and then, you know, walk them through it or make a video. And then they could tell you straight away if, yeah, I was getting confused again. They could just tell you straight away what they like, what they don't like. And it's minimal effort on your part. It's kind of like you made it once and like, this is what it looks like when it's blue. This is what it looks like when it's pink. I think that's how I use it a lot in WordPress. Just to quickly iterate with my clients and show them really rapidly what this would look like with different typography or different backgrounds and things like that. And I know I'm over, so I'm sorry. Any
Jerome
questions?
Green? Yeah, Jerome Green here. So when you're done with your Figma stuff, you can import it into WordPress then, correct?
I just build it. I build it in WordPress. You know, once I get the client, but like I might create a staging, like a staging site with a couple pages, and show it to a client, and they go, "Oh, I don't know, I'm not really feeling the colors," or "What if you did this?" At that point, I would bring it into Figma, play around with it quickly, and then what they
So,
landed on, I go back to WordPress.
oh, okay. So I get maybe it's the advanced course, but so when you hand this off to developers in WordPress, what do they do with it? Do they have to code it by hand, what you showed them in the Figma diagram, or do they do some sort of an import for all this code?
As far as I know, unless somebody tells me different, they would be looking at my handle file like an IKEA instructions, like a schematic, and building it in WordPress.
Oh, okay. So they'll probably have to code it. So there's no way to really import this stuff into WordPress for them to not have to reduplicate the code that's already out there.
It
I
looks
mean,
to me
there's
like they
some
would
code.
copy and paste, like there is that code in the lower right hand corner.
Yeah, they would have
Is
to
that
copy and
correct?
paste. Okay, yeah.
So it does a lot of work for them, but yes, it doesn't seem to. That's kind of what along the lines of what I was asking before. Does it create a master CSS file for the styling?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely not going to do the back end. I don't see anything in here unless there are tools. There may be plugins that would help it connect to a back end as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a Figma plugin in WordPress.org.
Jerome, like on the page that Roxanne was just looking at with that if you flip it, well, say you're creating
Oh, sorry.
you know, the page like here it says waitress, you know, and she sends you this Figma file. Well, then you know that, all right, on the front page of my website, I'm going to put at the top, I'm going to create, say, a cover block. We're talking block editor. I'm going to create a cover block. I'm going to drop a header in there that says waitress. It's either a logo or a special font that she specified for that. If only life were as easy as pie, and the Figma document would specify this is the font I'm using here, and I'm using it at say 50 pixels. And so as the WordPress developer, you build that block for that page. You have all your padding, you have all your margins, everything's out there and laid out. Because me as a developer, I don't want to have to figure out, all right, does this look right if it's this close to the big words, or is it got to be smaller? And I mean, I don't have that kind of sense. So I want somebody to tell me, no, Matt, you want it to be 406 by 46. You want it to have padding up the top of 90 pixels, and you want it to be a little bit off center because that's just the way the designer wants it. And it's like, all right, that's perfect. You know, because I know exactly how to build it then, which is
Like you're given the, yeah, you're given the specifications in the Figma document.
right. And I think it's a
Yeah.
really good analogy of the IKEA directions, you know, like put this here, put that there. Although it takes me forever to build an IKEA thing, but you know, that's beside the point.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's all it is all really laid out, and I just double clicked in here to show, you know, this is one of those special types, and the color and everything. So yeah, it takes all the guesswork out. It's a shame, you know. I just was embedded recently with a group of developers that were developing this app for a year, and they didn't have any designers on the project, and so they were spending a lot of their time worrying about those things instead of doing the coding. And I went to meet with one, and he opened up MS Paint, and he's like, well, I was trying to figure this out in MS Paint. And I said, oh, let me help you out. And I showed him the Figma file, and it had everything laid out where it was, because he couldn't figure out where to fit something. And he's like, oh my God, you mean you just give this to me and I just do it? And I said, yeah, you know, I already figured that all out for you. I already showed the product manager. She already signed off on it. You just go ahead and build it. Let me know if you run into any trouble. And he was free to be, you know, he was just totally free to just do the coding, hook it up to the back end, and he was so happy.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that from a coder's point of view.
You were
Yeah.
like his angel from heaven.
he was using MS Paint. I haven't seen MS Paint. Like, he started sharing his screen. I had a laugh. I was like, oh my God.
Were you tempted to say, oh, you poor dear?
I kept apologizing. I'm like, I'm so sorry. You're wasting your time doing that. But yeah, I'm trying. The only other thing I didn't show you was that they have a million plugins. There's even a plugin called which one is it? This one I really love. It's the corporate art plugin. What's it called? Let's see, Freepik. Storyset by Freepik. And I gotta tell you, I just did almost the whole website using so much of the stuff. I had a client who loved corporate art, but she wanted very specific corporate art. And she was showing me stuff from iStock and stuff like that. And that stuff's like all pings and stuff. And I needed vectors so that I could manipulate them and say, like, I went in here and I grabbed this corporate art, and she would say, well, I want two people there instead of just one. So I could like pull her out, delete her. Let's see. Oops, sorry. I'm going to ungroup. I'm going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And like, I could just grab her. Let me ungroup again. I can just like grab her and just group her. See, in this case, if you group, the cool thing is you can scale, like bring her in here, right? I could change colors, and I could regroup this. I was just telling you not to do any grouping, but for this I do grouping. I could go in here, change it to her colors, say her colors were like reds and stuff. And then I would just, you know, and then see if she liked it, you know, say that I changed the corporate art to do what she wanted. And then I just exported it as a ping, converted it to a webp, and like dumped it right into her website. And it was great because I could, this is all vector, you know? Whereas if you find that corporate art, the iStock stuff, it's pings, you can't do anything with it. I can make it all different sizes, you know, for different responsive breakpoints. And then I could just bring them in as WebPs and just pop them right into Elementor, and they looked so sharp and so great. So that was the last thing. Sorry, Lamb. I'll stop sharing now.
There's absolutely no need to apologize. That was absolutely fantastic. I think a number of us are delightfully overwhelmed by the power and scope of Figma. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. That was a great presentation.